Welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, I'm speaking with Head of Athletic Development at Port Adelaide Football Club, Ian McKeown. Hi guys, welcome to episode 37 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. So today I have my second guest coming from Port Adelaide in the AFL. So today we've got Ian McKeown. Really interesting chat with Ian. I'm going to keep this nice and brief, this introduction. Today we discuss assessing movement. We discuss movement assessment templates, specifically kind of FMS, the pros and cons, developing power in season, off season and pre-season, and alternatives to Olympic lifting. So it's a great chat with Ian. I'm sure you'll love it. Any comments that you have, just jump over to paceyperformance.co.uk, stick it in the comments box, and I'll make sure that Ian gets that and make sure he's aware and replies and that kind of thing. At the end of the episode does give all his contact details, so if you are interested in speaking to Ian a bit more in depth about what he says in the podcast, just fire him an email, fire him a message on Twitter, and he'll get back to you. All the show notes for this episode can be found at paceyperformance.co.uk/37. So all the links, all the contact details for Ian can all be found in there. And keep this nice and short. Enjoy the chat. And here is Ian McKeown. Hi guys, welcome to the Pacey Performance Podcast. Today, really excited again for another great guest, Ian McKeown. So, just want to thank Ian for giving up his early Friday morning, to speak to you on the podcast. So, just welcome Ian and get him to give us a little bit of information on his background, his experience, and what he's currently doing. So, welcome to the podcast, Ian.
Thanks, Rob. Thanks for having me. It's great to be part of such a great podcast. I know I always listen to it in the car on the way into work. So
love that. Thank you.
So I guess obviously I'm from Northern Ireland originally. I'm in Australia at the moment. I did my undergrad at the University of Ulster. And I did it in sports science at the time. But what was really lucky was at the time that I was sort of maybe second year was the time that the Sports Institute for Northern Ireland was just starting up as part of a UK sport funded project. I just happened to be at the right place at the right time. So pretty much as soon as I started my undergrad, my strength and conditioning career sort of became a little bit more of an interest as well. Obviously doing sports science meant that, I was really interested in the practical side of things. So I was able to do, my placement year. So my third year placement I did at the university, in the sports science, department, but also in the institute. So while they were, starting off as a fledgling sort of S&C delivery, I was able to be part of that and just sort of see how things sort of developed from the ground up, which was an incredible experience. After I graduated, I spent maybe 2 or 3 years working for the university in sort of various roles. I guess I started off as the performance services officer, which is pretty much like the commercial side of the sports science school. I think most universities have it now, where I was, people were paying for VO2 max tests, or they're paying for, body comp stuff, or they're paying for training programs, or semi-professional teams were looking for someone just to give them a bit of help in pre-season. So it was pretty much a one-man band, and that was it was a difficult time, as it was the sort of first time that anyone was really calling themselves an S&C coach outside of an institute setup back home, but and the rugby setup, obviously. So that was a good time, and that really stood me in good stead as a very young coach, trying to battle through all the meetings, as well as actually having to deal with a wide range of athletes. From that, then I was lucky enough to get an assistant S&C job at the Sports Institute for Northern Ireland. and I worked my way up through the system for 4 or 5 years. And in that time, I looked after quite a few different sports. I was lucky enough to work with Irish hockey quite a lot over the years, doing some very cool stuff, particularly with the girls side of things. And then in 2009, I applied. I'm successful with a PhD position at the Australian Institute of Sport in Canberra, which was awesome. That let me essentially be a full-time coach in Australia while also doing a PhD. A PhD was in movement, ability, and power development in junior elite athletes. So that meant I could also work down at ACTAS, which is the ACT Academy of Sport, where I looked after hockey and football. And yeah, I was able to get into lots of different sports and sort of entrench myself in the Australian sporting system. I also did the Matildas at the time, so the women's national team, football team. So I looked after them for 3 years while I was in Canberra, which is another incredible experience. And from there, finally, pretty much 3 years to the day that I sort of arrived off the boat, essentially in Canberra, at the AIS, I packed up and moved down to Adelaide and started my my sort of career down in the AFL, down in Port Adelaide with Darren Burgess and the great team that are down there.
Cool. So how did Port Adelaide come about?
I guess you probably better ask him Berger that one, to be honest.
Handpicked from thousands, wasn't it?
I don't know. I could tell that I could bullshit you here. I'm not quite sure that you'd believe me. I guess it was probably a real sort of conscious decision. Once I moved, obviously it was a big move coming to Australia, and as part of that, I was like, right, okay, I'm going to really try and forge myself a reputation here. So whether it's through getting a little bit more active on Twitter or blogging or those types of things, more just to keep people aware, so they didn't forget about me back home, but then also trying to really, I guess, put my money where my mouth is, and not just talk about things behind closed doors or in my own office or in the gym, but if people are talking about stuff, try and be involved as possible. And as part of that, I did the UK SEM conference, which was in, God, I can't remember. It was just before maybe 2011, and I just put together a poster abstract. I was able to get that funded to come up and spend a few days in London. Berger was speaking at it along with Craig Duncan and Andrew Frankel Miller and those guys and Vern Gambetta, etc. And I just grabbed Berger for lunch one day along with Craig, and I must have made some impression. 2 years later, then he's asking me, did I want to come work for him? So it was probably, hopefully that's something to do with it, and my sort of conscious decision to be a bit better with sort of more communication and that side of things. Hopefully that had something to do with it.
Yeah. So how? I mean, I think people are kind of cottoning on to the fact that has to be done. You can't just kind of sit in your home and expect things to come your way. You've actually got to go out and get to know people and sit next to people for lunch and buy people lunch even. Maybe put your hand in your pocket once or twice. But how obviously that was important at that time. Is it how important is that for the people going forward?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and it's something that I'd always support. We have a very open door policy at the club, and I know Berger's always willing to speak to anybody, and because we went through the same process. We were blind calling or blind emailing people, and you always want to have you always want to pay that forward or pay that back, I guess, into the profession. But I guess the thing for me is that people, young coaches, etc., don't just take, I guess, or just come and they want to ask these questions and that's the end of the conversation. I think you've got to try and offer something to the, I think that's it. Like, even if offering is just, like I'm willing to make the investment to come down and spend some time with you. I can help out wherever you need me to or whatever. We've got help here, but it's always nice to have, to have someone new, and we would always be very welcoming of it. We always get our guy, anyone who does visit, we try and get them to present on what they are interested in at that time, and it causes create a little bit of discussion around our performance team, I guess. So we've had guys come in and talk to us about say blood flow restriction training, or we've had guys come in and talk to us about we've had Grant Jenkins come in and sort of throw some curly questions at us from an athlete, we call it like a developmental coach model sort of point of view, and it just causes a little bit of discussion, and that's what we want. We don't want just people coming in and then asking how to use GPS and then going home again. We want it to be an engaging process for everybody. So that's probably one of the big things that I'm starting to notice, is that sure, we'll not say no to anybody, but it's being able to, that the person who you remember are the people who actually offer you something as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's cool. So I just want to delve a little bit deeper into you kind of the things that you're doing at Port Adelaide and your PhD a little bit. So when it comes to assessing movement, I sent a couple of questions over to you, and that was one that kind of came to me on a selfish point of view. So when it comes to assessing movement in the guys that you're working with or have worked with in the past, is there any specific models that you're kind of attached to, or that you've had success with in the past?
I guess I've been incredibly lucky to have some great people influence me and mentor me along the way. So, it was Kelvin Giles. I spent a lot of time with him back in the UK as well as down in Oz. Spent in darkened rooms talking about what comes first, in terms of the athletic pathway and static versus dynamic and squat, lunge, push, pull, rotation. We've all heard him talk about it, and it's an incredible. I've been incredibly lucky because the guys are a force to be reckoned with.
Yeah, definitely.
And I guess, so from an assessing movement point of view, I've written the AAA, which is the Athletic Ability Assessment, and it's not necessarily a bunch of exercises or movements which I feel that are more applicable or less applicable than anything else or anything like that. It's more just it's more about the system and the trying to get coaches to break down what they feel is important, being able to then tease further and tell me what in that movement is important, and then being able to score it in a way which stands up against the rigor of other sports science methods, such as lactate testing, VO2 max testing, 1RM scores. We all know what a small worthwhile change is. We all know what is a meaningful difference. We all know the difference in testers and our inter-tester reliability. Why can't we do that from a coaching point of view as well? What I found when whether it was working at the AIS or ACTAS or back in Sinai, is that as an S&C coach, when you do your what you call your service level agreement, or what you're going to do that year with that coach. Okay, and my athletes, we're going to get them stronger. We're going to get them. Maybe we're going to get them leaner. We're going to make them move better. So when we're talking about getting them stronger, you can improve their 1RM scores, or you can do that. But when you're working in a developmental space, and even at the elite end, it's not about chasing numbers to a certain degree. Like my philosophy is aligned to making guys as athletic as possible. Sure, there's a strength element to that and a power element, but it's also about making them as athletic as possible, which includes their athleticism and moving well. And I find that whenever you're sitting in a room with a biomechanist and a physiologist, and you've got your maybe your performance skills coach and the coach himself, and you're trying to sell them, well, I'm actually I'm going to make these guys move better. They're going to be more resilient because they're moving better. They're going to, they're not going to get injured. They're actually going to perform better for you, coach. And then you turn around and, well, okay, in a sort of bureaucratic system, you have to put something on paper which says they're going to move better. And it's all subjective. There's no, it's a one coach's eye versus another. That can change. And from the outside looking in, that's a very fluffy system. And that's what, sort of doing my PhD, I was trying to tackle some of these issues from the S&C coach's perspective, which is, well, you're a coach first and maybe you delve into sports science second. But I feel that, you should be able to take the positives of both and be able to meld yourself into this really, never mind the athlete being resilient and anti-fragile, the coach, the S&C coach should be able to do that. And as part of that, I guess the AAA, was my attempt at sort of being the conduit between the two. And that's what I'm trying to do with our work currently at Port Adelaide and a few other clubs and, universities around Australia. And anybody else who wants to join on, I'm quite happy to talk to them about it, and then we can discuss what's relevant for you. I think with assessment and particularly along with movement, is people obviously very typically will go down the FMS route, or they'll talk about it, and it's a very polarizing subject, and people either jump on it or they're completely against it. But I think what people have to think of first of all, or what coaches should be thinking of first of all, is why are they assessing, and what are they trying to get out of the assessment? From a screening tool point of view, so whether you're safe enough to actually train, but from an assessment, but why I call it an assessment and why we try and change the way we're thinking about it, is that our athletes have to train, or our players have to train and compete at a certain level, and a screen doesn't cut it in terms of just being able to say yes or no. We want to have it aligned, and this is a little bit more what Kelvin would talk about, is having the levels of difficulty and complexity improve as you go through the developmental space. So where you graduate from doing a bodyweight single leg squat to maybe like a loaded walking lunge to, the sort of the progressions which are in place. And that has to be aligned to the physical, structural demands of the sport, not necessarily from a competition point of view, but then also from a training point of view. And, sort of to not talk about this for the next 4 hours for you guys, that it is something which I think that, which we can get to, and hopefully, like, I find that the AAA is a vehicle for that. So like, for example, we've identified through our AAA assessment is that, and this is stuff that like Carl Woods he's just moved to James Cook University in Cairns, and he's helping me out with the sort of the more academic side of things. And what we've been able to show is that our elite players, our guys that are in 5-year plus in the system, are significantly and meaningfully different to the guys that are maybe in their first 2 to 3 years at the club. So they're well above the average in terms of how they move. And then even when we get our draftees, or our guys that are under 18s or an academy system, they're really far down. So if you imagine, if it was a score, it was 100% in a very, very basic test, our elite guys, our guys that are, playing at Adelaide Oval in front of 55,000 people, etc., they're getting, on average, sort of between 80, 85 plus. So they're getting like an A or an A plus or an A star. But unfortunately, the academy guys, or the guys that are starting off and are still training to a very, very high standard, are maybe only getting 30, 40% on things like being able to do a single leg RDL or an arabesque or whatever you want to call it, a double lunge, a push up, a pull up, these types of really basic exercises. They're failing at that level. So that gives us something which we need to work on and try and sort of rise that tide or push those guys through. So we've been able to identify that as one of the things which we can sort of hang our hat on, which is really interesting.
Mm-hmm. No, I know you said you didn't want to talk about it for the next 4 hours, but I'm going to ask you more questions on it. So the AAA assessment, do you just want to give us a bit more of a kind of a detail, if you can, what that entails?
Sure. So I guess everyone's going to have their own sort of modified version of it. Again, as I said, you want it to be applicable to your guys. So I'm not going to say that, for example, a bodyweight double lunge for a elite track and field squad is what you're necessarily looking at compared to a rugby squad. It's going to be different. But what is the same is we look at a scoring grid of 3x3 per exercise. So you've got your three scoring criteria. So your 3 coaching points, which you as a coach or you as a coaching group feel are the 3 critical things that you're looking for. The reason why you're putting an exercise in or you want to assess an exercise. So for me, I put in an overhead squat. I'm looking for depth of the squat. I'm looking for their trunk control. So if they're getting any flexion, extension through the lumbar pelvic control, and what is the compensatory pattern that they're getting overhead or from the shoulders up. What are they doing to get that bar overhead? But for another coach, they might be really they might be overhead athletes. So we're trying to really go after the overhead side of things. That's not for me to dictate why you put something in there. I think that's the organic part of the scoring and part of the system, is that you can chop and change in what you feel are the important elements of that movement. From there, then you're looking at you can do it repeatably and perfectly. So that would be like a score of 3. A score of 2 for that coaching point would be you're capable of doing it, but you just can't consistently doing it. You can't do it. So it might be for 5 reps. Maybe you can do the first one, then you fall forward, or you maybe get the one in the middle. So there's potential there, but you haven't ingrained it enough. And then a 1 would be you just can't do it. You just can't get your hands overhead and keep yourself in a relatively good position, or you just can't get the depth. You're just not in it looking like you're going to get near it. And then obviously, like to preface that is, if anybody's in pain or if anybody physically can't do it, they don't do it. I'm not going to force people to do it. And I know that pain has an influence on that movement. I'm not going to force them to do it and then score it and show them that they're bad because they're in pain. Okay, well, once they get rid of the pain, there might be a change in pattern. So we try and not muddy the water as much as possible. And we do that scoring system. So it's a tick box system. It's really easy to set up, and then you might do it for, again, it depends on the level of athlete and what you're looking for from the assessment, but typically stick to about 5-6 exercises, or movements. And we can run through that in maybe, like I get through the whole squad in the morning, and they'll do that as maybe part of their warm up for that gym session. Maybe it's an easy session. We'll do that as the warm up for it, and they fly through. Obviously our guys know the drill and get a bit of a system going, but it's not really that time intensive compared to other things. And the idea is that it formalizes your coaching eye a little bit, which from a developmental or junior coach point of view is a really important thing. So if you're mentoring guys and you want them just to see what they're actually, what can you see? I guess as a coach, that's a really important thing to be able to do, obviously, and you can formalize that learning a little bit more. There's many plus points to doing it that way, I feel, and yeah, that hopefully that gives you a little bit of an insight. There are some academic papers out there on it, and we're doing plenty more work around it. But I guess the the big thing for me is if anybody finds it interesting or intriguing, is to probably shoot me a line, and we can talk about it a little bit more in depth. Because as I said, I'm very careful of making sure that that we're doing it in an appropriate way for each environment, and we're tailoring it so that that each coaching group or each team or each organization is getting what they want out of it, rather than me trying to hammer a square peg into a round hole.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. I mean, you mentioned that it's a system as well as a kind of assessment. So depending on what scores they get, does that kind of funnel them into a certain kind of intervention for each strand?
Yeah, well, I guess I try and looking at the FMS and the correctives, I guess, that they give for the. I don't have necessarily a like a mind map or a decision tree which people work their way through. I'm not going to sit here and tell some of the greatest coaches or people that I respect this is how to deal with this guy's particular overhead squat mechanics. I feel that you have to give you're giving everybody the professional respect to go after it how they feel is appropriate, because people have got different environments, different athletes, different the athlete themselves can learn in different ways. So be telling them that they need to do this versus that. I feel that if we're at least giving a tool or a system, a philosophy of thinking, which then enables the coach then to delve deeper and get something meaningful out of the assessment, that's more what I'm about. And then letting the coach be creative and get the reward and the accountability that they deserve from it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So, I mean, just to kind of backpedal a little bit, your official title at Port Adelaide is Head of Athletic Development, is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. Cool. So how does that fit in to the kind of overall performance team? Where do you fit into that team?
Yep. So I guess you've got Burjo at the top, who's performance director or some such title. I think he changes it every week as well. We're all as bad as each other. Underneath Burjo, then there's myself as head of athletic development. We've got a head of sports science, which is Stuart Graham, who's an incredible mind and is doing some phenomenal things with GPS and load monitoring. And then we've got a head of physical therapies, Tim O'Leary, who's essentially head of the medical side of things, so the physios and the massage soft tissue side of things. And then we've got the doctors that sort of sit out to the side of that. It's just the AFL structure. That's pretty much how it sits. And underneath myself, I've got two S&C coaches who help me out and who have their own players to look after. And then we've also got an honours student and a PhD student working with us as well, who support our system and our program. But then also they look after the Magpies, which is the SA NFL team, which is the I guess the local professional league down here.
Cool. So I just want to kind of delve into that role a little bit more with regards to kind of developing power for your guys. Obviously, we were talking before about the kind of athletes you're getting through the doors in the AFL. Just want to talk to us a little bit about how you're kind of developing power. Obviously in season now, but a couple of weeks back in the pre-season.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess from my point of view, the way that I tackle the strength and power development of our guys is it's sort of, again, it's under the umbrella, I guess, of athleticism. So we aren't doing Olympic lifts with our guys at the moment. I love Olympic lifts. I'm a big advocate of them when they fit into the program and the athlete, and it's appropriate for the athletes. It's not in our environment at the moment. Our guys aren't that skillful from a movement point of view to be able to load it to the appropriate levels. So we don't we find other ways to play around with our power development, particularly in a loaded environment, such as trap bar jumps. We do loaded jump squats. We'll do unloaded jump squats. We spend a lot of time working on I guess, unloaded and loaded, step up type work, or we're trying to transfer our strength qualities into how we run, I guess is probably where we're going down a lot, which is more your skill acquisition side of power, I guess, and using that potential that you've got. So it's really quite I guess a boring answer, to be honest, but we're continually developing that. So although we have a periodization model, what we find is that we're pushing the envelope the whole way through the year, whether it's in season or pre-season. Pre-season, we're spending the time, I guess, preparing our guys to be stronger and more powerful. But to be honest, an AFL pre-season is absolutely obnoxiously brutal. Our guys are doing so much volume in terms of out on the field that my main job is to ensure that they are 100% out on the field. So before we even look at some sort of performance improvements with their physical qualities, so you're making sure that they're I'm a big advocate of Dave Tenney and the anti-fragile sort of way that he talks about things, and I know that comes from the book, but I love the analogy with it. So we're making our guys anti-fragile throughout pre-season and even in season, and that's the priority. Then we start to work on, I guess, the sexier stuff outside of that. We load where we can. So with our squats and things, we're not capable with a lot of the guys. They don't have a development structure where they're in a formalized training environment through the 16s, the 18s, and then into the senior ranks. A lot of the guys who turn up at our door after being drafted as an elite player have never been in the gym before, or don't know how to do a proper warm up. So never mind, having a rep range or a loading scheme for these guys to get stronger through squats and power cleans, whatever you may desire. We actually have to teach them how to move properly first, and that takes a lot of time. And these guys some of them are 90, 100 kilos and are expected to play in their first year, but yet they're like little kittens in the gym. So we've got to try and create this environment where we're pushing them and making them better and making them more athletic, while still trying to fight the fires and trying to sort of backfill their athleticism, because they've got to where they are because they're freaks. They're incredible guys, but they're starting to cash in checks that the body can't handle, essentially, and we've got to try and backfill that. So I guess a lot of our time is spent doing that. So yeah, like in terms of strength and power and what we do, it's probably, I don't think we're doing anything that nobody else is doing. But what I would like to hang my hat on is that we're sorry, excuse my French, but we're coaching the shit out of it, and we're making sure our guys are, we're hanging our hat on our guys being the most athletic team in the AFL, if not in terms of across codes. We're making sure that our guys are. Everyone lords AFL as being these incredible athletes. Yeah, but we're going to make sure that our guys are the best of those incredible athletes. So that's my challenge, and that includes strength and power, obviously. But we try and make it a little bit wider, I guess, as well.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned about doing things simple and coaching the hell out of it. Do you think there's a bit of a kind of a need? People think there's a need to do things that are a bit outlandish rather than actually reining it back in and just doing the simple things really well?
Yeah, I guess outlandish is probably, I guess it depends on where you're at with your athletes. For me, 2 years ago, outlandish would have been doing cleans, or would have been even doing some of the velocity-based training. Our guys that weren't capable of moving well enough to be able to apply and be, to get rid of the noise of those tests or those movements, to be actually able to use it in a way which was accurate, or in any way scientific, in any way, being able to see if we were making any changes. So I guess, for me, like, all the incredible, the technology that's out there. And, we use GymAware a lot now, but back 2-3 years ago, we couldn't have done that, and it would have been inappropriate. So you spend the time trying to chase in other ways, and that's probably, everyone's trying to look for the new, the golden nugget, the new method, the new technology, which is going to change how they train. But I think it's not necessarily applying anything new, but it's developing yourself in a logical system over years, possibly, if you're lucky enough to get a chance to spend time to plan over years and put these things in place in a way which actually are going to make a difference, rather than just putting in place and it's nearly a little bit hearsay, that you're actually you're just going through the motions with it. Oh, I got 3,000 watts today. Oh, well, you're lifting it like an absolute idiot. So it's not appropriate at all. So it's just trying to ingrain that, and I guess the patience and and saying this, obviously in professional sports sometimes that doesn't necessarily happen, and you got to get them ready for Saturday. And I think with our playing group and our coaching group, I think that's an important thing to mention, is that they have incredible trust and patience with us, and they know the journey that we're on, and they buy into that journey, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get there. So we are afforded a little bit more time than possibly you would get, say, at a rugby club looking after the under-20s, where you got to get these guys ready to play, next year, and they're playing against some absolute animals. We're in the same position, but we've been given just a little bit more time. So hopefully we can ingrain the athleticism a little bit more.
Cool. So again, you mentioned before we started recording about a skill acquisition session, and you just mentioned it there about increasing that transference from your strength work onto actually what happens on the pitch. Can you just talk to us a little bit about the kind of things that you do in them sessions?
Sure. So I guess in season we have a session which is 2 days before the game, and traditionally in strength, power sports, they'll do this the day of the game, or maybe the day before the game, where the primer type session, where you're hormonally priming yourself to get ready for the session. In AFL, we're not hormonally priming them 3 days out from a game, don't worry. It's more, it's just a term that I've taken from the sort of the more, I guess that the higher end, the sharper end of the strength continuum in those sports. So we call it prime time, or we've got a primer session, which is more where we're trying to take the strength qualities which we work so hard on developing, and actually make them into worthwhile patterns or worthwhile physical qualities, which actually directly influence how they play the game. So the first step for me was going to the coaches and saying, like, what are you talking to your players about, from a line? So the backs talking to the backs coach, the mids talking to the mids coach, etc. And saying, what are you physically trying to get these guys to do, and what are they struggling with? So typically, so rather than them just being able to come back and say, oh, I just want them to get stronger and faster. Okay, great. We're doing that anyway, but how do we make them better footballers? Because my job is to make them better footballers. It's not just to make them stronger in the gym. It's to make them more athletic and make them better footballers. So when you go to the coaches and you actually go with that type of question, they come back with some really interesting concepts and ideas. So I guess it's nearly like a joint coaching session. And I wouldn't dare try and coach Aussie rules or any other sport. I'm a strength and conditioning coach. I'm looking at it more from a movement point of view. I'll let the context and the technical side of things be driven by the coaches. Absolutely, there's no question of that. But it's more from a physical, the physical attributes which underpin what they're trying to do. I try and help them with it. So for the backs, it could be simple things like body position when they're marking guys. How do we make sure that they're in the right positions? How do they transfer from that body position into into running very fast in one direction or another. With our mids, it might be how do you explode out from those contests. So from when there's 15 people around the ball, how do you get from that low position on the ground away and be able to collect the ball, or how do you tackle, or how do you set yourself up for that? So we try and play around with the physical qualities. Typically, we do a little bit of plyos, we do a little bit more explosive work, but then we also add in these other drills, I guess, as well, which is where we try and, so from a skill act point of view for the game, we try and do that. We also do we spend a lot of time putting a very slow drip sort of theory into how we get these guys to run better. Our guys, it's a running sport. Our guys are running, some of the numbers are ridiculous from a preseason point of view, but then also in games. So typically they've never been taught how to run, and they've got to where they are being absolute freaks. But what happens then is sometimes they're breaking down because we're pushing to the edge. So we're trying to put in, whether it's hamstring injuries or hip flexors, groins, or bony stuff, we're slowly but surely putting in place a technical model which allows us to make our guys more efficient, more explosive, and just give them a little bit more economy in their running, particularly the top end type running, where we're actually getting them to push that envelope a little bit more. So I've bastardized everybody going out there, from Bosch's work, from Franz Bosch's work, who's obviously very popular in the UK and obviously down in Oz as well. But then also a huge influence on me is the Dan Paff and Stu McMillan at the World Athletics Centre. So I try and use as much of what they taught me, but use it in a way which is context specific, and we're actually able to make some changes, and that's been huge. So from a slow drip point of view, what I mean is we've been doing things for the last 18 months, maybe in warm-ups, maybe in gym warm-ups, just getting them to understand what a free hip is, understanding how to link their trunk to their hips to a single leg stance. Then we started looking at, maybe in the gym session, how are we coaching lunges? How are we coaching step ups? What are we looking at when we're doing those exercises? And then trying to put a take on it, which is very deliberate, but it's putting the coaching points which we want to get across when we do warm-ups outside, or we're taking them through conditioning drills. What are the cues that I'm going to use out there? Can I get them embedded earlier on in the process? So in terms of that sort of slow drip theory, that's what we're trying to do, is put that in place, and we've taken our time to get there. But now, we're spending a lot of time doing dribbles in our warm-ups. We're spending a lot of time in the strength sessions looking at single leg extension work. So whether it's a single leg back extension, or we're looking at single sort of step up to box type work, or those lovely exercises you see of videos of people that go to the Franz Bosch workshops and things like that. We're playing around with that and trying to use the skill act theory which he talks about, but being able to challenge it in our environment with our guys. So that's pretty much, I guess, again, another long answer. Sorry, but
that's all right.
we're trying to do skill act from the footy specific type work, but then also from I guess it's footy specific, but in a way which is more looking after the running model, which we're trying to get to as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that sounds great. So did you go across to Arizona?
Yeah. I was incredibly fortunate to spend a bit of time there last off season, so in October time. So I was able to spend some time with Stu and Dan, and they were very kind to sit and listen to me talk about athletic development in AFL and sort of the trials and tribulations of how to program and coach an AFL squad compared to what they're used to in the sort of the track and field world. And it was an enlightening, eye-opening experience, and I'll definitely be back plenty of times to keep moving forward with my my knowledge and my experience of that world, because it's incredible.
Yeah, but no, it looks they plaster loads of stuff on social media, don't they? It looks great, the kind of stuff they're doing out there. But I know it's early in the morning for you. I don't want to keep you too long before you have your breakfast and go to work. So I just want to kind of round up a little bit. But have you got any kind of events that you're going to? Anything up and coming? Where can people catch you, and what kind of things you got going on?
Sure. I guess I don't actually. I'm actually pretty quiet at the moment. Down here, yeah. I don't really have too much. I guess the big thing is the new short course, which the club are running in conjunction with UniSA down in Adelaide. I don't know if anyone's seen that.
Yeah, I think I saw it.
It's been a little bit on social media.
Yeah.
Already. So I'll be part of that faculty, which is really exciting. It's very new for us. I guess for everybody it's very new. But yeah, that's going to be a very, very cool experience for people. And there'll be more than that one. So that's going to be pretty cool. So I'll be part of that. Yeah, and look, as I said before, if anybody does, want me to clarify on some of the stuff that I'm talking about, or maybe delve deeper into AAA or anything else for that matter, like I'm on Skype quite a lot with people, so like I'm more than happy to do that, or emails or whatever. Drop me a line on Twitter. I'm more than happy to talk to people, and it's as much for me as it is for them. So like I'm more than happy to do that.
No, that sounds great. That sounds great, mate. Thank you very much. The AAA, is that published anywhere, or is there any kind of written work about that? What you've done? Yeah,
there is a paper in the International Journal of Sports Physical Therapy. I believe it was in the December issue last year, so December 2014. But again, most of my work I'll stick on academia.edu, I think it is, or .com or something like that, or I'll stick it on ResearchGate as well. So if anybody wants access to the papers and they don't have access to certain journals, then they should be able to find things throughout. My thesis is on there as well, and pretty much anything I'm associated with, I'll try and make sure that people know where to at least look at the abstracts.
Yeah, of course. Well, I'll try to get them, and I will get them and stick them on the site where this is going to go, so people can get access to it pretty easily, hopefully. So yeah, I really appreciate your time, your 45 minutes that you've given up just straight out of bed. So thank you very much. Really, really interesting. I've taken loads of notes, as I always do with all these kind of things. So yeah, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time, and good luck for the rest of the season.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
No problem, mate. And I'll speak to you soon.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, mate. Bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to episode 37 of the Pacey Performance Podcast. Hope you enjoyed the chat with Ian. As I mentioned in the intro, you can catch up with all the show notes from the episode with Ian on paceyperformance.co.uk/37. So there's all the links on there. So if you want to check out all the previous episodes of the podcast and you haven't checked them out yet, just go over to paceyperformance.co.uk/podcast. So we've got some great guests coming up over the next couple of weeks, so make sure you check them out. You can subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and don't forget to keep checking back to the paceyperformance.co.uk site, and all the previous episodes and future episodes will also be on there. And I will catch you in episode 38.